The sound of coffee brewing filled the small office as Diane Miller rubbed her tired eyes. The clock on the wall showed 3:24 a.m., but sleep was the furthest thing from her mind. For 3 nights straight, she had been analyzing the same signal, pattern that her radio telescope had picked up from deep space. At first, she thought it was just random noise, something common in her line of work at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. But this was different. The pattern repeated with perfect mathematical precision. Diane took a sip of her coffee and played the audio version of the signal again. The soft beeps and pulses had a rhythm to them, almost like music, but with clear mathematical ratios that couldn't be natural. Her computer had been running algorithms all night, trying to decode what she was increasingly sure was an artificial message. The office door opened, and Frank Carter walked in with his own cup of coffee. As Diane's supervisor, he had been skeptical when she first reported the unusual signal, but he respected her enough to give her time to investigate. "Please tell me you went home at some point," Frank said, noticing the same clothes she had worn yesterday. Diane shook her head. "I couldn't. Look at this." She pointed to her screen where a series of repeating patterns was displayed. "These aren't random. There's a clear sequence of prime numbers here, followed by what I think are periodic elements." Frank leaned closer, his skepticism fading as he studied the data. "That's deliberate." "Yes. And it's coming from 4.3 light-years away," Diane said quietly. "Frank, this is it. This is what we've been searching for." Frank stood up straight, the impact of her words hitting him. "You're saying—" "I'm saying we're receiving a message from another civilization," Diane finished. "And based on the signal patterns, I think it's a cry for help." Within hours, Frank had forwarded Diane's findings to Dr. Alan Rodriguez, the new head of SETI. By noon, observatories around the world were confirming the signal. By evening, a team of cryptographers, mathematicians, and linguists had joined. Diane, too, decoded the message. 3 days later, Diane stood before a room of government officials and scientists. Her hands trembled slightly as she presented their findings. "The message contains mathematical constants that serve as a universal language," she explained. "After this introduction, it transitions to what we believe is a form of binary communication. We've decoded approximately 70% of it." She paused, looking at the serious faces around her. "It's a distress call." The room remained silent as Diane continued. "There is a fleet of ships carrying survivors from a dying civilization. They're stranded in space after their engines failed. Based on our calculations, their life support systems will fail within 6 months. Without help, an entire species will be lost." An older man in a military uniform spoke up. "How do we know this isn't some kind of trick or trap?" Dr. Rodriguez answered. "The complexity and consistency of the message make deception unlikely. The signal includes detailed information about their biology, technology, and the nature of their emergency. They're not asking us to come to them with weapons or resources. They need technical assistance to repair their ships." As the debate continued, Diane's phone buzzed with a text from her colleague in the lab. "Complete translation finished. Situation worse than we thought." The United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session the next day. Representatives from every major nation gathered to discuss humanity's response. The room was tense as experts presented the situation. "The aliens call themselves the Liriani," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "They are a peaceful spacefaring species who fled their home system when their sun began to die. They've been traveling for generations looking for a new home. They were headed toward a promising star system when their propulsion systems failed after passing through an unexpected radiation cloud." "And they expect us to help them?" the Russian representative asked. "We've barely left our own solar system." Diane, who had been invited to speak, stepped forward. "They don't know we received their message. It was sent in all directions as a desperate last act. They don't expect rescue." The room fell silent as images appeared on the main screen. The best approximations of the Liriani ships based on the data they had sent. 7 massive vessels arranged in a protective formation around a central, larger ship. The central ship carries most of their population in suspended animation, Diane explained. The other ships contain their technology, biological samples from their homeworld and cultural records. They are trying to save not just their people, but everything about who they are. The debate lasted for hours. Some nations argued that humanity should focus on Earth's problems before attempting an impossible rescue mission. Others saw it as humanity's first chance to prove itself as a compassionate galactic citizen. In a quiet moment during a break, Diane found herself standing next to Olivia Patterson, a NASA engineer known for her experimental work on fusion drives. "Could we reach them?" Diane asked, not expecting a real answer. Olivia stared at the star charts. "With conventional rockets? No way." She paused, then added more quietly, "But with my fusion drive design, maybe." Diane looked at her with surprise. "I thought that was still theoretical." "The small-scale tests worked," Olivia replied. "We've never had the funding or reason to build it full size. Until now." When the Security Council reconvened, Olivia presented her proposal. Her fusion drive could potentially reach the Liriani fleet in time, but it would require resources from multiple nations and technologies that had never been used together before. As the Council deliberated, news of the alien distress call leaked to the public. Rather than panic, something unexpected happened. People around the world began holding vigils for the stranded aliens. Children sent drawings of Earth welcoming the Liriani. Scientists and engineers volunteered their expertise. 7 days after Diane first recognized the pattern, the Security Council reached its decision. Humanity would attempt the rescue. The project was named Operation Starbridge, and construction began immediately on the rescue vessel in Earth's orbit. Parts and personnel were shuttled up daily as the world's best minds worked together. Captain Paul Bennett was chosen to lead the mission. With 3 deep space missions already under his belt, he had more experience than any other astronaut. When reporters asked why he would risk his life for unknown aliens, his answer was simple: "Because they need help, and we can give it." As the ship neared completion, Diane found herself standing in the observation room watching the final components being attached. "Will it work?" Frank asked, joining her at the window. Diane watched as the ship's new fusion engines glowed blue during testing. "I don't know," she admitted, "but we have to try." 2 months after the signal was first detected, the USS Horizon prepared for launch. As humanity's first true deep space vessel powered by Olivia's experimental drive, it represented not just a rescue mission, but a giant leap forward in human technology. In his final briefing, Captain Bennett addressed his small but skilled crew. "What we do today will be remembered for generations, not just on Earth, but perhaps throughout the galaxy. We are about to meet our first alien civilization. They won't know we're coming. Imagine their surprise when humans, a species they've never encountered, arrive to save them from certain death." The crew took their positions. On Earth, billions watched their departure. As the Horizon's engines ignited, pushing humanity farther and faster than ever before, Diane whispered to herself, "Don't worry, help is on the way." The USS Horizon moved through the darkness of space at speeds humans had only dreamed of until now. Captain Paul Bennett floated in the observation deck, watching as stars streaked past in blurs of light. The experimental fusion drive hummed throughout the ship, a sound that had become comforting to the crew over the past 30 days of their journey. "Captain," called the ship's AI through the communication system, "Dr. Clark requests your presence in the biology lab." Paul pushed off the window and navigated through the ship's corridors. The Horizon was the most advanced vessel ever built by human hands, constructed in just under 60 days through the combined efforts of nations that had once been enemies. The alien distress call had united Earth in ways no human crisis ever had. In the biology lab, Dr. Susan Clark was studying holographic projections of what they believed the Liriani might look like based on the information contained in their message. "Any new insights?" Paul asked as he entered. Susan nodded, her short blonde hair floating slightly in the zero gravity. "I've been reviewing the biological data they sent. The Liriani breathe a similar mixture of gases to us, but their biology is silicon-based rather than carbon-based. Will that be a problem for interaction?" I don't think so, Susan replied. But their body temperature runs much cooler than ours. We'll need to adjust the environmental settings in any shared spaces. Paul nodded, making a mental note to discuss this with the engineering team. What about communication? Lieutenant Martinez has been working on translating more of their language. That's actually why I called you here, Susan said. Jack has made a breakthrough. They made their way to the communication center where Lieutenant Jack Martinez was working with a complex array of symbols on his screen. He looked up as they entered, his face showing excitement. Captain, I've managed to create a basic translation matrix, Jack explained. Their language uses tonal shifts and mathematical patterns. With the help of the ship's AI, I think we'll be able to communicate in real time when we meet them. Good work, Paul said. We're going to need that. According to our latest calculations, we should reach the Liriani fleet in about 6 weeks. Chief Engineer Gregory Williams joined them, carrying a tablet with engine diagnostics. The fusion drive is holding steady, Captain. Olivia Patterson's design is performing even better than expected. Will we be able to help the Liriani repair their propulsion systems? Paul asked. Greg's expression grew serious. That depends. From what we understand, their technology is very different from ours. They use some kind of biomechanical system that interacts directly with their bodies. I've been studying the technical specifications they included in their message, but there are gaps in my understanding. The next few weeks passed with the crew preparing for first contact. They practiced communication drills, studied the limited information they had on Liriani culture, and ran simulations on potential repair scenarios for the alien fleet. On day 42, the ship's sensors detected something unusual. Captain to the bridge, the AI announced over the ship-wide communication system. Paul arrived to find his crew gathered around the main view screen. In the distance, barely visible, were strange lights that didn't move like stars. Magnify, Paul ordered. The image zoomed in to reveal what looked like crystal structures floating in space. They glittered as they caught the light from a distant star. The Liriani fleet, Jack whispered in awe. Distance? Paul asked. 4 million kilometers enclosing, replied the navigation officer. At our current speed, we'll reach them in about 12 hours. Paul turned to his communications officer. Begin broadcasting the greeting message we prepared, on all frequencies they might monitor. Hours passed with no response. The crew grew tense as they approached the alien fleet. Now they could clearly see 7 large ships arranged in a protective formation around a central vessel twice the size of the others. The ships were unlike anything humans had designed. They appeared to be made of some crystalline material that shifted colors as they watched. Still no response to our messages, Jack reported. Either they can't hear us or they can't respond. Or they don't trust us, Greg added. Paul considered their options. We'll continue approach but at reduced speed. Susan, what can our sensors tell us about life signs? Susan studied her console. The readings are strange. The central ship shows millions of very faint life signs, almost as if they're in some kind of suspended state. The other ships have only a few dozen active life signs each. That matches what they said in their message, Paul noted. Most of their population is in suspended animation to conserve resources. As they drew closer, they finally received a transmission. Strange musical tones and mathematical sequences appeared on their communication system. Jack worked quickly at his station. They're responding with the same mathematical language they used in their distress call. I think they're surprised to see us. Using the translation matrix they had developed, Jack sent back a simple message. We are humans from Earth. We received your distress call. We have come to help. There was a pause before the response came. The translation was rough, but clear enough. You traveled 4.3 light years to assist unknown beings. This concept is difficult to process. Tell them yes, Paul said. Tell them that's what humans do. The horizon slowly approached the largest alien ship. Through the viewports, the crew could see damage to the crystalline hull, fractures and dark patches where systems had failed. They're inviting a small team to board, Jack announced after another exchange. They want to meet the beings who would cross such distances to help strangers. Paul turned to his senior staff. Susan, you're our xenobiologist. Greg, we'll need your engineering expertise. Jack, you'll need to come to help with direct communication. We'll take a shuttle over in 2 hours. As they prepared for first contact, Paul found a quiet moment to record a message back to Earth. We have reached the Liriani fleet. They are alive, but their situation is critical. We are about to board their vessel to assess how we can help. The journey was worth it. We have found another intelligent species among the stars, and our first act will be one of rescue and friendship. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the enormous alien ship up close. Its surface shimmered with colors that seemed to respond to the light of their shuttle. As they approached, an opening appeared in the crystal hull, glowing with soft blue light. That looks like an invitation, Susan said. Paul nodded as he piloted the shuttle forward. Let's not keep them waiting. Humanity's first meeting with alien life is about to begin. The shuttle passed through the opening, entering the strange new world of the Liriani ship. None of them knew exactly what awaited inside, but they were united in their purpose, to save a civilization on the brink of extinction, and perhaps forge the first interstellar friendship in human history. The shuttle docked inside the crystalline ship with a soft thud. Paul, Susan, Greg, and Jack checked their environmental suits one last time before opening the hatch. The air readings from outside showed a breathable mixture, but colder than Earth normal. Remember, Paul said to his team, we're guests here. Follow their lead and be respectful. When the hatch opened, they were greeted by soft blue light that seemed to pulse gently through the walls. The inside of the Liriani ship was unlike anything they had imagined. The corridors were rounded tubes of the same crystal-like material, as the hull with no sharp edges anywhere. The surfaces glowed from within, eliminating the need for separate lighting. It's beautiful, Susan whispered. They waited at the shuttle entrance for several minutes before movement caught their attention. 3 tall figures approached from the end of the corridor. The humans stood in silent awe as they got their first look at the Liriani. The aliens were about 7 feet tall with slender bodies that seemed partially transparent. Their skin shimmered with an inner light that pulsed in gentle waves. Each had 4 long arms ending in 6-fingered hands. Their heads were oval-shaped with large, multifaceted eyes that reflected light like diamonds. Where a human would have a mouth, they had what looked like thin membranes that vibrated as they moved. One of the Liriani stepped forward and made a series of musical tones. Jack quickly activated his translation device. Welcome, humans from Earth. The translation came through. We are surprised by your arrival. Our message was sent without hope of rescue. Paul stepped forward. We received your call and came to help. I'm Captain Paul Bennett. These are my crew members. Dr. Susan Clark, our biologist, Chief Engineer, Greg Williams, and Lieutenant Jack Martinez, our communications specialist. The lead Liriani's skin pulsed with brighter light. The translation device interpreted, I am Keeper Sorrel, guardian of the sleepers. These are Healer Nima and Engineer Talax. We are the last awake crew of our fleet. The others remain in deep sleep to preserve our limited resources. Sorrel gestured, for them to follow. As they walked, the humans noticed signs of damage throughout the ship. Darkened sections where the crystal no longer glowed, cracks in the walls that had been patched with different material, and areas where the temperature dropped noticeably. They were led to a large central chamber where a glowing sphere floated in the middle of the room. Around it were strange devices that looked like a mixture of technology and living tissue. This is our main control center, Talax explained through the translator. It is also failing. We have diverted all remaining power to maintain the sleep chambers. Greg studied the alien technology with fascination. Can you show us your propulsion systems? We need to understand what happened to help you repair them. Talax's light dimmed slightly. The damage may be beyond repair. We passed through a radiation storm that our sensors failed to detect. It damaged the biocrystalline interfaces that allow us to merge with our ship's systems. Susan looked confused. Merge with your ships? Nima approached Susan. Our technology is different from yours. We do not simply operate our ships, we connect with them. Our nervous systems linked directly with the ship's controls. The radiation damaged both our biology and technology simultaneously. The gravity of the situation became clear to the humans. This wasn't just a mechanical problem, it was a biological one as well. "How many of your people are in suspended animation?" Susan asked. 3,400,022, Sorrel answered. "They are the last of our kind." Paul felt the weight of this number. An entire alien civilization's survival rested on their ability to help. "We need to see everything," he decided. "Your propulsion systems, life support, the sleep chambers. We'll need to understand it all to figure out how we can help." For the next several hours, the humans were given a tour of the massive ship. They learned that the Liriani had been traveling for over 200 years after their home star began to die. The ship they were on, called the Lightkeeper, contained their genetic banks, cultural libraries, and most of their population in suspended animation. Greg spent most of his time with Talax, examining the damaged propulsion systems. The look on his face grew increasingly concerned as he understood more about the alien technology. Meanwhile, Susan worked with Nima, learning about Liriani biology. The aliens had evolved on a world with weak gravity and little solar radiation, resulting in their semi-transparent bodies and sensitivity to light. Their silicon-based biology allowed them to interface directly with their crystalline technology in ways humans couldn't. Jack and Paul focused on understanding the ship's navigation and communication systems. They discovered that the Liriani had been heading toward a star system with potentially habitable planets when the disaster struck. When they regrouped in the control room, Greg had bad news. "Their propulsion system is unlike anything we've ever seen," he explained to the others. "It's partially biological, grown rather than built. The radiation damaged both the mechanical components and the living tissue that controls them." "Can we repair it?" Paul asked. Greg shook his head. "Not with what we have on the horizon. Even if we had the right materials, it would take years to grow new biocrystals." The Liriani watched this exchange, their lights dimming in what the humans now recognized as sadness. Susan stepped forward. "What about their life support systems? How long can they last?" "Less than 2 months, Nima answered. "Not the 6 we estimated in our message. The time your signal took to reach you and your journey to us. We are closer to the end than we hoped." Paul looked around at the control room, at the alien technology merged with living systems, and at the 3 Liriani who had stayed awake for decades to protect their sleeping people. "There must be something we can do," he said, more to himself than anyone else. Jack, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly perked up. "What if we don't try to repair their systems? What if we replace them?" Everyone turned to look at him. "Our fusion drive," Jack continued, excitement building in his voice. "It's different from anything the Liriani have, but it's incredibly powerful. Could we adapt it somehow to move their ships?" Greg frowned in thought. "The scale is all wrong. Our drive is designed for the horizon, which is tiny compared to these ships, and there's no way to physically connect it." Talax moved closer, his lights brightening. "What type of energy does your drive produce?" "Mainly electromagnetic radiation and particle acceleration," Greg answered. The 3 Liriani began to pulse light between them in what seemed like a rapid conversation. When they finished, Sorrel turned to the humans. "There may be a way," the alien said. "Our bodies and ships respond to electromagnetic fields. If your technology produces such fields, perhaps we can create an interface." For the first time since arriving, Paul felt a spark of hope. He looked at his team and saw the same determination in their eyes. They had traveled across the stars to save a dying civilization, and they weren't going to give up now. "Let's get to work," he said. Days passed as the humans and Liriani worked together to find a solution. The USS Horizon now floated alongside the massive alien fleet, looking tiny by comparison. Inside the Lightkeeper, the main control room had been transformed into a shared workspace. Diagrams, tools, and pieces of technology from both species covered every surface. Greg and Talax spent hours examining the Horizon's fusion drive, trying to understand how it might be adapted to work with Liriani ships. Greg had brought in key components to show the alien engineer how Earth technology functioned. The main problem, Greg explained, pointing to a holographic model, is scale. Our drive can't possibly move all 7 of your ships. Talax's body pulsed with light as he considered the problem. Perhaps we don't need to move all ships at once. If we could save the Lightkeeper with our sleeping ones, the rest of our fleet could follow later. Greg shook his head. Even one ship of this size would require more power than our drive can produce. In another section of the control room, Susan and Nima were studying the biological aspects of the problem. Susan had been fascinated to learn how the Liriani's crystalline bodies could channel energy similar to fiber optic cables. "Your biology is amazing," Susan said, as she examined cell samples under a microscope. "Your bodies naturally conduct and amplify energy." Nima made a sound that the translator interpreted as appreciation. "It evolved on our homeworld, where light was scarce but precious. We learned to make the most of every photon." Suddenly, Susan sat up straight, an idea forming. "That's it. You don't just use energy, you amplify it." She rushed over to where Greg and Talax were working. "Greg, what if we don't need to make the fusion drive bigger? What if the Liriani themselves could amplify the energy it produces?" Greg looked skeptical. "How would that work?" "Their bodies naturally channel and enhance electromagnetic energy," Susan explained excitedly. "If we could create some kind of interface between our drive and their biocrystalline systems, they might be able to multiply the output." Paul and Jack joined the conversation, having overheard Susan's idea. "Is that possible?" Paul asked Talax. Taker. Alien engineer's lights flickered rapidly as he considered. "In theory, yes, we have used our biological amplification abilities with technology before, but never with a foreign power source." "Would it be dangerous for your people?" Jack asked. Talax's lights dimmed slightly. "Yes. The interface would require direct neural connection. The one who connects would bear great pain and risk permanent damage." A heavy silence fell over the room. Paul looked at his crew, then at the Liriani. "There must be another way," he insisted. Greg spent the next 2 days working with Talax to design a safer interface, but each attempt failed in simulations. The energy from the fusion drive was simply too different from what the Liriani systems were designed to use. On the 3rd day, Sorrel called everyone to the central chamber where the sleeping Liriani were kept. Millions of crystal pods lined the walls, each containing a hibernating alien. The sight was both beautiful and sobering, an entire civilization preserved in glass, waiting for a future that might never come. "We have 1 month of life support remaining," Sorrel announced. "If we cannot find a solution soon, we must accept that our journey ends here." Paul refused to give up. "What if we took some of your people aboard the Horizon? We could at least save a small number." Sorrel's lights pulsed gently. "We appreciate your offer, but we will not abandon our people. Either we all survive or none of us do." That night, the human crew returned to the Horizon to rest and regroup. They gathered in the ship's small mess hall, exhaustion clear on their faces. "There has to be something we're missing," Paul said, staring at his untouched food. Susan looked thoughtful. "The Liriani evolved to amplify light and energy. Their entire civilization is built around this ability. If only we could harness that on a larger scale." Jack had been unusually quiet. Now he spoke up. "What if one connection isn't enough? What if we need multiple connections? A network of Liriani all channeling the energy together?" Greg considered this. "That might work, but Talax said the connection process is painful and dangerous. We can't ask them to sacrifice themselves." "Maybe we don't have to ask," Jack said quietly. "Maybe I could be the one to connect." Everyone stared at him. "That's impossible," Susan said. "You're human. Your nervous system isn't compatible with their technology." "But what if it could be?" Jack insisted. "Nima showed me their neural interface. It uses electromagnetic signals that aren't so different from our own brainwaves. With some modification, a human might be able to serve as the primary connector, creating a bridge between our technology and theirs." Greg looked skeptical but intrigued. That's a huge risk, Jack. We have no idea what that kind of connection would do to a human brain. We have no other options, Jack argued, and we're running out of time. The next morning, they presented the idea to the Liriani. Talax and Nima studied Jack's brain scans and compared them to Liriani neural patterns. There are similarities, Nima admitted, but the differences are significant. A direct interface would cause extreme pain and likely permanent alterations to your neural structure. Would it work? Jack asked simply. After a long pause, Talax's lights brightened. Yes, it could work. Your brain would serve as the primary connection point. Our awakened crew could form a secondary network to amplify and channel the energy to the ship's systems. Then I'll do it, Jack said without hesitation. Paul pulled Jack aside. This isn't what we came here for. We didn't travel across space to sacrifice one of our own. Jack looked Paul directly in the eyes. We came here to save them. This is how we do it. One person risking everything to save millions. Isn't that the best of humanity? Over the next week, the team worked to create the neural interface. Greg modified parts of the Horizon's fusion drive to connect with the Liriani systems. Susan worked with Nima to prepare Jack's mind and body for the connection, using medications to strengthen his nervous system. On the day of the attempt, Jack sat in a crystal chair in the center of the Lightkeeper's control room. Wires and tubes connected him to both the fusion drive components and the Liriani biocrystalline systems. Around him, 20 awakened Liriani formed a circle, ready to amplify the energy he would channel. Are you sure about this? Paul asked. One last time. Jack nodded, his face calm despite his fear. Totally sure. Tell them back on Earth. Tell them we made friends among the stars. Susan injected him with the final preparation drugs. This will help your brain process the energy flow. But Jack, we don't know what you'll be like afterward. As long as these people survive, it's worth it, Jack replied. Greg gave the final systems check. Everything's ready. The modified drive is online and stable. Sorrel approached Jack. Human, we will remember your sacrifice forever, whatever the outcome. Jack took a deep breath and nodded to Greg. Let's light this candle. Greg activated the system. Jack's body went rigid as the connection established. His eyes flew open, glowing with the same light that pulsed through the Liriani. The circle of aliens began to glow brighter, channeling the energy flowing through Jack's mind. The ship trembled as dormant systems began to power up for the first time in years. Around them, the crystal walls pulsed with renewed energy. Paul watched in awe and fear as his friend became the bridge between two worlds, the impossible connection that might save an entire civilization. The control room of the Lightkeeper filled with blinding light as energy surged through Jack's body. His face showed pain, but he remained conscious, his eyes now glowing with the same blue light that ran through the Liriani ship. The circle of aliens around him pulsed in rhythm, amplifying the energy flow. Power levels rising, Greg called out as he monitored the systems. The biocrystal network is accepting the fusion energy. Paul watched anxiously as the ship hummed to life around them. Lights flickered on in corridors that had been dark for years. The gentle vibration of working engines began to build beneath their feet. Jack, can you hear me? Susan asked, monitoring his vital signs on a portable device. Jack didn't respond with words. Instead, his voice came through the ship's communication system, merged with a strange musical tone. I can see everything, he said. I can feel the ship. And the sleeping ones. So many minds dreaming together. Sorrel moved closer to Jack. Can you direct the energy to the propulsion systems? Jack's glowing eyes turned to the alien. Yes. I understand now. It's not about pushing the ship. It's about asking space to move around us. The humans exchanged confused glances, but the Liriani seemed to understand. Their lights pulsed with renewed hope. He is accessing our navigation archives, Talax explained. Knowledge that would take years to learn. Outside the ship, the USS Horizon's crew reported that the crystal hull of the Lightkeeper was now glowing with swirling patterns of blue and white light. The other 6 ships in the fleet began to glow as well, connected by streams of energy passing between them. Inside the control room, Jack suddenly tensed. "There's a problem," he said, his voice strained. "The hibernation chambers are drawing too much power. The propulsion system can't fully engage." Sorrel conferred quickly with the other Liriani. "We must wake some of our people to help manage the power flow." "No," Jack said firmly. "There isn't time to wake them safely. We need another solution." Susan looked at her medical readings with growing concern. "Jack's brain activity is off the charts. He can't maintain this connection much longer without permanent damage." Paul faced a terrible choice. Pull Jack out and risk the alien's survival, or keep going and risk losing his friend. Before he could decide, Greg spoke up. "What if we bring the Horizon's fusion drive online at maximum output? Feed its energy directly into the Liriani network?" Talex's lights flickered rapidly. "That would require moving your ship dangerously close to ours." "We'll do it," Paul decided. He activated his communication link to the Horizon. "This is Captain Bennett. Prepare to move alongside the Lightkeeper. We're going to connect our main power systems directly to theirs." The Horizon carefully maneuvered until it was almost touching the crystal hull of the alien ship. Greg worked with the Horizon's engineers to extend power cables across the short gap between the ships. "On my mark," Greg called when everything was ready. 3, 2, 1, mark. The Horizon's fusion drive roared to full power, sending a surge of energy through the cables into the Liriani ship. The connection point glowed white-hot as the energy transferred. In the control room, Jack's body arched as the new power flowed through him. "Yes," he called out. "It's working." The 20 Liriani in the circle began to move in a slow, spinning pattern around Jack, their bodies trailing light as they amplified and directed the combined energy from both ships. The control room became a whirlwind of light and sound as the ancient alien technology fully awakened. "Navigation systems online," Jack announced, his voice now blended with the ship's. "Life support stabilized. Propulsion ready." Sorrel stepped forward into the circle. "Where shall we go, human friend?" Through the neural connection, Jack could access all the star charts and data from both human and Liriani sources. "Earth's solar system," he said after a moment. "It has a planet called Mars. Cold but not too cold. Low gravity. Thin atmosphere, but it could be changed over time. Perfect for your people." The Liriani lights pulsed with excitement. Sorrel turned to Paul. "Would your people welcome us?" Paul smiled. "We crossed the stars to find you. I think that answers your question." With Jack guiding the merged systems, the massive Liriani ship began to move. The crystal hull vibrated as ancient engines powered by new energy pushed against space itself. The other 6 ships followed, connected by streams of energy to the Lightkeeper. The journey back to Earth would take 3 months, enough time for the Liriani to gradually wake their sleeping population and prepare them for their new home. As the fleet accelerated, Susan noticed Jack's vital signs beginning to stabilize. Whatever's happening, his body is adapting to it. After 6 hours of continuous connection, the Liriani helped Jack disconnect from the system. He collapsed into Paul's arms, exhausted, but alive. His eyes still held traces of blue light, and fine crystal patterns had formed on his skin. "Did it work?" Jack asked weakly. "Yes," Paul told him. "We're on our way home, all of us." Jack smiled before falling into a deep sleep. Susan's scans showed his brain had indeed been changed by the connection. New neural pathways had formed, similar to Liriani patterns. "Will he be okay?" Paul asked her privately. Susan studied the readings. "He's still Jack, but different. Parts of his brain show patterns I've never seen before. He may have gained abilities we don't understand yet." 2 weeks into the journey, Jack recovered enough to explain what had happened. "When I connected to their system, I could see their whole history, their science, their art, their understanding of the universe. They don't just travel through space like we do. They have a relationship with it." "And now you do too?" Greg asked. Jack nodded. "I can still feel the ships even when I'm not connected. It's like they're singing to me." As Earth's solar system came into view 3 months later, the Liriani fleet arranged itself in a beautiful formation. From Earth, they appeared as new stars in the night sky, visible even in daylight. The United Nations quickly approved the Liriani settlement of Mars. In exchange, the aliens offered to share their technology, including methods to transform the Red Planet into a habitable world over the next 50 years. Jack became the official ambassador between humans and Liriani, his unique connection to both species making him the perfect bridge between worlds. The crystal patterns on his skin grew more pronounced over time, and he discovered he could communicate with the Liriani without words, a living link between two civilizations. 1 year after the rescue, Paul visited Jack at the new joint Human-Liriani research center on Mars. They stood looking up at Earth shining blue in the Martian sky. "Was it worth it?" Paul asked. "Everything you gave up?" Jack smiled, the crystal patterns on his face catching the sunlight. "Look around us, Paul. Two species working together who might never have met. A new future for both of us. All because we answered a call for help." In the decades that followed, humans and Liriani worked together to explore the galaxy. The hybrid technology they developed allowed both species to travel farther than either could have alone. And on every ship that left the solar system, the story was told of the day humanity reached across the stars to save a civilization they had never met. Not for profit or advantage, but simply because they heard a cry for help and chose to answer.